This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland.
It's a time I remember oh so well. Saint Columba had to flee at the Battle of Cordivna, his guilty soul to free. As Columcille he was also known throughout his native land, but blood and tragedy prevailed, so he waved an exile's hand. Farewell to dear old Garton and lovely Derry too, never to return again, across the sea he blew.
Columba. He was a very political figure in his time.
He was always thinking big. He was a statesman of the kingdom of God.
Going as a missionary among the Picts into what we would call Scotland itself.
He looked out to the Picts to the north.
He was this type who wanted to go out and preach to a community, to make Christian ideas known throughout what became Scotland. A wonderful, brave thing to do.
Columba had a transforming effect on to mainland Scotland and way beyond.
White sails filled and soon he reached Iona's sandy shore, to build an exile's holy place of learning and much more. Pilgrims came from all around fair Scotland's hills and glens. From far and wide the holy flocked like sheep released from pens, to see a chapel built of stone, to melt the hearts of man with beauty in a lonely place where evil soon is banned.
I'm Paul Wright and welcome to the 6th programme of Back from the Brink, the series which investigates the role of the early medieval Irish in helping to save Western civilization. In our last programme, we heard how the Irish monk Columba, also known as Columcille, left Ireland in the year 563 AD to establish monasteries throughout Western Scotland. To this end, Columba spearheaded a mission to try convert the pagan Picts of Scotland to the Christian faith. Lindisfarne-based Celtic Church historian Ray Simpson.
He was always thinking big. He was a statesman of the kingdom of God. He looked out to the Picts to the north. He walked up the great glen up the side of Loch Ness. And on the way to meet Brud, the king of the Picts, he came across the Loch Ness monster. People don't realise that there is this historical record of the Loch Ness monster in Adam Nann's Life of Columcille.
We can love this man because he does all sorts of fun things, like goes and fights the Loch Ness monster.
Iona-based early medieval historian Benjamin Cook.
He's travelling up north to go and see the Pictish king, reaches the bank of the River Ness, as they call it, and just as he's arriving, there's a funeral going on. He says, well, what happened? And they discover that this man had been swimming out in the lake and was savaged by a wild beast in the lake. And he says, oh, well, this isn't right. And so he asks one of his monks to swim to the other side of the river. As Celtic saints often did, they were quite harsh with their subordinates. They put them in really difficult situations and didn't seem to care too much for them. So he sends this monk out who goes swimming, and the beast comes chasing after him, and Columba makes a cross in the air, and the beast withdraws and is never seen again. And there's the Loch Ness monster, and this is sort of in the 700s. You're hearing these stories.
And there are different accounts of his meeting Brud, the king of the Picts. One account has it that Brud was not pleased with Columcille and his delegation and wouldn't open the gates. And Columcille held a service and sang so loudly and persistently and long that in the end they opened the gates. Adonai says it was an angelic thing. But we do know, one account says that Columcille raised from death one of the family. Another one says that Brúd became a Christian. I think it's probably more likely that they established some kind of relationship. Hospitality was given, and Columcille prayed for needy people in that household. And from a political point of view, a kind of alliance had begun between the Scots-Irish and the Picts, which was very important because battles were always taking place. But it was important from the point of view of Christianity too, because Columcille always had an eye for political well-being. His foreign policy, I suppose you could say, was to win the gratitude and friendship of neighbours, which isn't a bad foreign policy for any nation to have today.
Historian Ray Simpson. Over to historian Benjamin Cook once again.
And there's really a sense of power politics as well as a missionary zeal. He's not just out here converting people, he's also bringing greetings from the Irish High King and greetings from the Kingdom of Dalriada and coming from this Irish colonies in Scotland to the Picts and bringing them a whole different world and a whole different experience, because they'd never encountered writing, they'd never encountered literature in the same way. They still had an oral tradition, and here was someone who could bridge that gap between the written word, between the cultures of Rome and Greece, and at this time Ireland, which were written cultures, which were places where history and legend and story had a definite form to people who didn't, and they were able to speak these stories.
So the monastery at Iona was never inward looking, it was always reaching out. And of course many of Columcille's monasteries were built on waterways, which were the motorways of those days. They were the strategic places in order to penetrate the population.
It was an entire change in power politics and the way that systems worked. I mean, the Picts did have a distinction between priest and king, but there was most definitely, it created a different level, a different caste, as it were. Priests who were scholarly, the monks and their centres, the monasteries, that were the forerunners of this new kind of industry of knowledge and education. And that was a power-broking tool. If you can write something down, if you can write an IOU, you think about the modern check, writing was an ability to be able to record things in a way that had not been seen before. And people picked up on this. It gave Irish traders a strong edge for knowing how much things could be worth, and it also was something that was of value in and of itself in a culture that did not necessarily have much in the way of currency and where people still traded. If you could establish centres of learning, then Ireland has something to offer. It has the scriptoriums, it has the books. If there are monks in a Pictish kingdom, you've got something to sell them, and that something is culture. Just think about Hollywood now. Hollywood sells movies to all of us, and we want that. And that is a product that has more than just a cultural, or in this case religious connotation. It has a commercial value as well, and it pushed that forwards.
A transformation soon became an era touched with gold, where old and young flocked to hear the greatest story told. For holy words spread far and wide to the castle of King Brúd, where the Picts across the border began to share God's word.
Columba, he, as far as we know, was the first example in Britain, or in Europe perhaps, of a leading church person making the appointment of a king.
Historian Ray Simpson once again.
The king of Dalriada, the Irish colony, in what is now Scotland, died. He was asked to nominate the successor, And it's a great story because he wanted a particular person, but God didn't want that person. And he had a dream in which an angel told him, you've chosen the wrong person. And he wasn't amused, so he didn't take any notice. So he had the same dream the next night, and he didn't take any notice. He had the same dream the third night, and this third night the angel slapped him on the thigh so hard that, says the biographer, he had marks on his thigh thereafter. And he got the message and appointed the guy that the angel had told him to appoint, who was Aidan MacBran, King Aidan MacBran. Now, he then went to the rock at Dunad.
Dunad was the centre of the kingdom of Dalriata on the west coast of what is now Argyll. And Columba is described as being part of the crowning of a king at Dalriata.
Jan Such Pickard, Celtic Church historian and also former warden of the Iona community in Scotland.
His presence was felt to be necessary to make the establishment of this ruler of this new territory really valid. So, yes, he didn't just stay in Iona. People came to see him here. People came for different reasons, but he also, for different reasons, spiritual, political, went out from the island. So Iona must have been a very busy place.
And aside from Columba's genius in politics, historical records also relate how he was renowned for working miracles, encounters with angels and the gift of prophecy. Ray Simpson.
To me, one of the most remarkable things about Columba is that the book, written by his descendant Adamnan, an abbot of Iona, is divided into 3 sections. Would you ever have a biography today divided into 3 sections like this? A section on angel experiences, a section on miracles, and a section on prophecy. Now, most people in the last century demythologise all this. They said, oh, you can't believe in all that, and they took it out. I think that was a mistake. You can't understand Ireland of the early Christian centuries without understanding that tremendous sense of the unseen world, of the spiritual world, breaking in on this world. And I find it absolutely fascinating to read the stories of angel encounters. And there's a little hill at Iona, which is called the Hill of Angels.
The Hill of the Angels, the story is that one day Columba said to the brothers in the monastery, "Now, I'm going out to pray. Don't any of you follow me." If you say something like that, of course, there's always one, isn't there? So as he went out off to the west of the little island here, one of the brothers followed him, hiding behind the rocks, until he came to a point where he saw Columba climbing up a little green hill that's just on the edge of the Macha and standing to pray. And he stood, as the saints would in those days. He prayed crosswise. He stretched out his hands. And as he stood there praying crosswise on the hill, the brother saw angels coming down all around him, settling on the ground and speaking with him, so that his prayer became a conversation with angels. And the brother, hidden away there, just couldn't believe his eyes. He kept watching. And in the end, Columba ended his prayer, and the angels went back like seagulls flying away. And as Columba walked back towards the monastery, the brother ran another way and got back and thought he'd not been seen. But then, we're told, Columba called him out by name, took him aside and said, "You disobeyed me." And the story, Adamnan's story says, with terrible threats, he told the man he should never reveal what he had seen until Columba himself was dead. And so the man didn't, of course, until he was dead, which is why I can tell you now. But to me, this is a story about a man surrounded by angels, aware of that dimension, but with his feet on the ground. He stood on the green hill. And those saints, Columba himself, he was a man with a vision of angels and with his feet on the ground.
And Iona-based historian Benjamin Cook had this pertinent comment to make.
For us now, we very much read these things and say, oh, well, this may not have happened. I personally don't see any reason that it didn't happen as it's recorded. But looking back at it, this is a world where the verge between life and death is a lot thinner, where saints are people you can talk to and ask things of. And if Columba could see this much when he was in a body and tied down with all these worldly things, what now that he is dead and in heaven? What would happen if I asked him for help or for an understanding of what is going to happen now? Because he saw these things when he was alive. Now that he is dead and away from it and has that distance from this world, how much more powerful is he? As to sort of angels and visions of that, well, this was part of their world, it's part of the way they see things and the experience of life. Iona is a place of fairies, it is a place of giants, it is a place where these things are real. And when you come out here to the Hebrides, all these stories seem more believable. It is such a light and airy, such a bright and wild place that you can believe that you'd see these things. There's no reason that you could not see an angel descend upon the hill at the south end of this island, and it seemed perfectly natural. And it's one of the great joys is that these things, which seem so unbelievable elsewhere, become so real here.
Well, he arrives in 563 AD and he dies in 597 AD, so sort of just over the 30 years he's here and associated with Iona. He's not permanently on Iona in that time. He does travel around. He's quite a mobile monk, which is one of the ways, of course, he spreads his ideas and teachings, and his monks continue that. But I mean, obviously 597 is the day when he dies.
Nicky Scott of Historic Scotland. Here's historian Jan Such-Picard to once again share her views.
It was a very peaceful death, and at the point of his death it is said that he went into the church and Mass was said, and then at the time of his death it was said that a great light was seen in the church, and the monks had a sense of the presence of angels. So that again takes us back to him praying on the Hill of the Angels. But they were very conscious that he was with God, and that Iona, of course, had become the place not of his death but of his resurrection.
From the snow-clad peaks of mountains to the cold depths of Loch Ness, truth defeated evil and Columba's soul was blessed. As the light of heaven cloaked him with truth and tenderness, the angels bore him homeward on heavenly wings to rest.
In his final day, the day before he died, there's a lovely story told about a horse, a white horse, that's there, and the horse senses that he's going to die, and the horse starts to cry, and the monks are chasing the horse away, and Columba says, no, don't chase them away, the horse knows more than you, the revelation of God comes through animals. And it was this phenomenal concept of how God works through animals as well as just human beings. Revelation is not just restricted to human beings.
Glasgow-based early medieval historian David Traynor.
The thing about it was he was still copying on the day before he died as an old man, frail. He was so frail he had to be taken in a cart across the island to the other side. But he was writing Psalm 34 verse, and it actually tells us Psalm 34 verse 10 And to me, it sums up his whole life and his whole legacy, and what he brought to Scotland, what he brought to me and to the people of Scotland. Because in that verse what he's writing, we're told he was writing this just before he died. Strong lions grow weak and hungry, but those who trust in the Lord will lack nothing. It was a marvellous way just to end his life. You know, they talk about your last words, and these were his last words, these beautiful, powerful words from Psalm 34.
Columba, when he was full of years, returned to his forefathers in glory, you know, in this sense of going up. And was very important that he had a good death. He had a death in Christ.
Historian Benjamin Cook.
Although he wasn't martyred, he wasn't killed for his faith, he died in his faith. And that was very important to future generations, because that was what they were aiming for. That's what the future generations of monks dreamt of, was being winged to heaven by a large throng of angels, was what they hoped for. So it's kind of very much this sense of creating the dream for people to strive after.
So what is Columba's ultimate legacy? Historian Ray Simpson.
I think part of his legacy was to build the foundations for a Christian Scotland. Many people think he should be the patron saint of Scotland rather than St Andrew, who never went anywhere near the place.
The key thing about Columba is that he almost lights a spark, as it were. I mean, yes, there are other missionaries, other Christians active in what we now know as sort of Scotland, England and Ireland in this period. But in founding Iona, he sets off sort of a chain reaction almost. Other Columban houses are formed throughout what is now Scotland. And of course, famously, Lindisfarne. This is one of the key ways that Christianity reaches many of the peoples of what we now know as England. So I think it is that wider legacy of the spread of Christianity. He himself may not have come primarily to convert, but by lighting that sort of touch paper almost, he enables his successors and other monks to go out and through founding monasteries, through preaching, through teaching, he enables this wider spread of Christianity. And of course we cannot underestimate the importance of Lindisfarne to sort of Northern English and Northumbrian Christianity. And I think that is one of the ways in which we really need to remember Columba as that person who sort of starts the sort of wider federation of monastic houses which do so much to bring Christianity to other areas of Britain and Ireland.
Historian Nikki Scott and historian Jan Such-Picard once more shares her views.
It is said that the voice of Columba could be heard across the Sound. Now, that's a mile across. He must have had a powerful voice. I think that there might be a symbolic truth within that his voice was heard beyond Iona. Not just because he travelled, but somehow because, goodness knows he probably had some gift of voice projection, which those of us who preach would be very glad to have. But his resonant, powerful voice with its message was heard way beyond Iona, not just across the Sound of Iona, but into the mainland of Scotland. And it was an impact in his time. And of course it was also embodied by his community, because he wasn't a man on his own. He founded a community, and it was members of his community, people like Aidan, that went out and went to Holy Isle. So the mission of the monks from Iona, and continuing up the west coast as well, that was very significant. Scotland became Christian, more Christian under Columba.
we have folks here on Iona who come from all over the world, from all walks of the Christian faith, who are inspired by this man's example in their own lives.
Iona-based early medieval historian Benjamin Cook.
We have groups who come who are Methodists, URC, Church of England, Catholics. The Orthodox come and they have icons in the traditional Orthodox style of Saint Columba. And, he is a saint for them, even though, we think of them as being a church from beyond the borders of Europe, from Russia and from Greece. Actually, they feel a sense of ownership for him as well. And that's that sense that he still inspires others to live a life that is better, that is more holy, that is more virtuous, and that is more true to their faith, is his greatest legacy. Well, that's not to do down the art, that's not to do down the culture, that's not to do down the peace and the politics that he brought, but that is very much the strongest thread that we all take from him and that we can all empathise with.
There are people who don't have any faith who come to Iona, and they're drawn to it by all the things that Columba said and all the things that Columba did and all the things that Columba was.
Scottish historian David Traynor.
That last thing is the most important, because Columba he was a presence, and there's just something about Columba that speaks to so many different people from so many different backgrounds, and it cuts across all this nonsense of bigotry and so on. Columba does that, and that's his greatest legacy. As I said earlier, one of the greatest things from his writings was this whole notion of the strength of gentleness.
And to discover how a humble Irish monk called Aidan built on Columba's phenomenal success by helping to transform Northern England from a pagan warrior-based society into a more peaceful, Christian and literate one, then make sure to catch our next number 7 programme in this 12-part Back from the Brink series. This programme was made with the support of the Broadcasting Authority of Ireland. Songs by Cliff Wedgbury. Until our next programme, from myself, Paul Wright, bye for now.